Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team, and we're doing our DesignShop Talk today. Hopefully the stream service is up and running today and not doing the excitement it was doing last time. So hopefully this is all happy today. Anyway, if you have questions while we're live, both on Facebook and YouTube, if you can type them in on the comments, that would be fantastic. Don't send them privately. I don't see those while we're live. So let me get my chat stream where I can see it. There it is. All right. So I'll start off with the questions that were sent in ahead of time, and we'll kind of run from there. So one of the questions was asked, how do I pick the right version of DesignShop for the work you plan to do? So that's kind of the business decision to some degree, right? So if you're looking at, what's your business model going to be? Are you planning to try to sell digitizing services? Are you planning to deliver 1,000 shirts? Those sorts of things. Because depending on, or also you got to think about who's going to be doing the digitizing, right? Do you have graphic capabilities? Do you have a computer strong enough? Are you artistically inclined, if you will? Those sorts of things kind of will help you decide which way you want to go, right? Because when you outsource digitizing, that's a cost. So you're either going to have to pass that on to your customers, you're going to have to account for that, or it's also a cost for you to do it yourself, right? So at some point you've got to make that trade of, how do you want your time to be spent? What's most effective for you? I know even I even send digitizing out at times, not all. Basically, if I know it's going to take me a really long time to digitize something, because it's a really complex piece and whatnot, I send it out. Mainly because I like to contain my time so that I'm putting it to the best use. So those are all just things to think about as you're choosing which one. And then it really goes from there. If you're going to be digitizing, I highly recommend getting the professional level. It's got a lot of cool features, and it's always, I don't know, I like it if I'm doing something and the software can do it, I want the capability to do it. So that's just my personal preference, but it really is going to boil down to you looking at what do you want to do. If you're just going to do personalization, maybe you can get away with just doing the lettering thing, right? So you send out complex stuff, do your own lettering. That might be a trade. If you're going to send it all out, well, you might be able to get away with just having Sizer, okay, which is the free option. So it's, how do you pick? You look at your business plan and decide, how are you going to do it? What's the best use of your time? It would be my suggestion. It's kind of, I have version 9. I tried to combine elements, but I can't. I want to make this. And I didn't put the picture in there, but what that was a picture of like a key fob, a name that was cut out. So let's look at how we'd make that. I'm checking to make sure both streams are up, since I did not do that before. It looks like both are up. Cool. I guess. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so where are we? So first off, I think what you said is you have version 9. Let's just look at combining elements first off before we do that. Combining elements only works for complex. All right, so if you are trying to combine, Shift Enter, this shape with this shape, it's not going to work, right? Because these are walk normal stitches, and it is not a fill. The only way you can use the combine is if these are both of the fill type. All right. So to combine those, first you can convert them over. Select your elements, hold your control key down. Control changes it from one type to another. Shift adds. Okay. So if you select those, you hold Shift and you click on these. That gives you your fills. Now your combine elements is right there, so you can combine them by clicking on that. Okay, so the combine and subtract works only for fills. All right. So if you're doing your little name, all right, so let's say I want to turn this into a little name fob that, you know, sculpts around here. All right. If you have version 11, it's really easy. You would come over here, go Object, Generate Primer Stitch, go to the, oops, not basting, go to Primer, set this to, I don't know, something you like, and you'll see it'll kind of sculpt around there. Okay. Now, that is a new feature to 11. I know you said you had 9, so you don't have that. So how can you do it? I do have quite a few videos that I did before I was doing videos for Milko. And they're out on YouTube somewhere in the ether. I'll see if we can find them, but that show different ways to do this in the old versions of the software. But you can, for instance, I'm going to copy and paste this, Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to go Operations, let's convert to vector. Now that I have a vector, I can take this guy and go Object, I got to do it one at a time. Object, Offset Outline, and let's say 40. So I can come over here. Can I do multiples? I don't even remember. Operations, Offset Outline, 40. Okay, and then I can delete these holes. Delete the hole. And now I can take all of these vectors, and combine them together. So what on earth did I just do? Well, what that is creating is a shape that now I can trace or turn into that outline that you want, right? So I can take that vector that you saw I created that stupid fast. And that used no features from 11. So that's all using stuff that you can do in the older versions. So then I can take this and say Shift. Remember, Shift is add, Control is swap. So I'm going to hold Shift and click on the walk. And now look what I got. I have my name with an outline of a walk stitch around there. Okay, so then, I mean, you wanted to have a little tab thing hanging off of it, so I could draw that. Yeah, and I would probably want both of those to be bean stitches, so they're nice and secure. Anyhow, so you can create those pretty quickly and easily. All right. We have a question typed in. I did my weekly maintenance and I'm getting an error message that my needle plate is installed incorrectly. So I assume you have an X machine. So the X machine, there's a knife on the inside, okay? And that knife has a hole in it. That hole goes over the bar that it has a pin that sticks out on the arm. So if when you put the needle plate back on, that knife wasn't in there, it's not going to be able to trim. Okay, so you need to make sure that the needle plate is installed so that the knife is over the pin. So let's see. Can you use 60 weight thread for small letters on a structured hat? Do you have to use the smaller needle? Yes, you can use 60 weight thread. Do you have to use a smaller needle? No, but well, you're sewing on a hat. I personally would not enjoy sewing a tiny needle on a hat. So you can use the thinner thread in a larger needle, but just keep in mind when you do that, you're not getting the full benefit of the smaller thread, or because your needle's bigger, right? So it's going to have a bigger hole that it's punching for the thread. Now it'll still have the thin thread, so you still can use it. It's just not ideal, if you will. We did get you a link in the comments on the needle plate, so take a look at that. All right, let's see, what else do we have? Can you highlight the cursor? I have no idea how to do that, but I will start. I didn't turn that feature on. I'll try to hold still a little bit more to show where it is. Okay. What else? How do I create a hole in or void in an area so it lets the fabric to come through. Cool, let's do that. It's like a trapunto type design. All right, so let's draw a fill. So right here is the complex fill tool. I'm going to click on that guy. Okay, then I'm going to click on the little box down here because I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Left click and left click somewhere on the screen, and we have that. I wonder if I can change the cursor size. Sorry, I'm pondering how to help you with this. Let me quick see if I can do this to help. Mouse. Sorry, I'm gonna spend 1 second doing this because if it helps, it'll help everyone. Mouse cursor size. Oh God, I'm gonna hate this, but let's try this and see if you get, oh my gosh. We'll try it, see if you guys like it. Okay, big cursor. I'm not gonna enjoy this, but you guys should. All right, for Corbin, if what I would recommend is giving a call to tech support and have them walk through it for you, because you said you've replaced the plate and it's not registering. So yeah, I would call tech support. Maybe they can log in and help reset or see what's going on there. Okay. All right, back to what I was doing. Rio, go away. I'm busy. All right, so how do we create a hole? That's what I was doing. All right, so I got a fill. Oh my gosh, this cursor is a hoot. Right here is the insert hole tool. So when you want to add a hole to a fill, you need to first select the element you want to add a hole to, and then right here you click on the hole, and now you can draw it. So let's say this is what I want removed. I can draw that, and now I got some funny teeth or an M hole in there. Okay, now you can also, if you're not aware, you can also use this, hold that down, and right there there's a clipboard shape. So let's say you want to cut a hole in the shape of a clipboard shape. You can do it using that guy. Okay. But it's easiest, you just select what you want, click on the hole tool, draw the, if you're doing this as a towel, you can always come over here and go to decorative. So this is a fun little effect here if you set it up as a decorative stitch. So you can always come over to stitch type, change it to decorative, and then try different decoratives. So that's just another kind of fun thing to try. Okay. Good morning, Georgia. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I like these. All right. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Okay, so for this one, Nate and I both were playing around trying to make this happen for your question, and I couldn't duplicate it. So I honestly have no idea why it would be doing this. If you can email the file to applications@melco.com and let us take a look at it, that would be incredibly helpful, because both of us tried to get it to do this, to see if there's any way we could force that to happen, and neither of us could. So if you can send the file that is doing this to you, that would be particularly helpful. All right, can you show how to take a purchase file and bring it into DesignShop and change some of its characteristics? So Scott did a video on editing expanded files that we're going to try to get you that. Now, changing things in expanded files is not a straightforward thing. There is no just change stitch direction. You'd have to redigitize that portion or convert it to wireframe or something. Now, density is easy. So you can modify the densities by going, all right, let's go open an expanded file. File, open. This cursor is cracking me up. Maybe. Hello, my computer is being weird. That's nice. What is my computer doing? That's magic. Oh, helps if I don't click 100 things at once, huh? C drive, designs. Where is designs? There, designs, and right there's an expanded file, right there. Okay, so I have an expanded file, and remember, expanded files are things that do not have wireframes. When you open them in DesignShop, they show up as these expanded things, right? So changing density, you can right click on it and go to scale, and down here you can modify the scale, you can add some pull compensation, you can do some edits here, but you're not going to change the stitch direction. Okay, if you want to change your stitch direction, then you're either going to have to convert it to wireframe. So how do you do that? And keep in mind, converting to wireframe is not always a good idea. I don't think anyway. Right click, operations, go to convert object to wireframe. And now if I go up here, you'll see now I have a fill, and now I can modify the stitch direction by selecting it, clicking on this guy, which is stitch direction. And this cursor is a hoot. Thing you can drag it around. Okay, so yes, you can do modifications. Now, if you're going to use that convert object to wireframe, so again, how did I do that? Select it, right click, operations, convert to object to wireframe. Okay, so those are the steps you would do, but then it's just a matter of modifying it for what you want to do. Now, if you're going to convert to wireframe, I wouldn't suggest converting the entire design. I just do the element you want to modify. Okay, so try to find just that portion and convert that, and don't do the whole thing. Because you're changing how whoever digitized this, how they intended it to sew out. Okay, we did get you a video on editing expanded files, so check that out. Okay. All right, what else do we have? All right, we talked about this one. I need help. It doesn't trim. I noticed some kind of metal piece behind the needle. All right, the metal piece behind the needle, let's just stop there. That's the presser foot. So that's the thing, it goes up and down as the needle goes up and down. That holds the fabric down. So if your presser foot is too high and it's not touching the fabric when the needle comes down, you may be having flagging on the sewing that's contributing to your trims. Things in your digitizing to look for is make sure you have trims enabled, right? So, oh, that's not the right terminology. Tie-in and tie-offs enabled, because if you go into the properties, so I right-clicked on that, went to properties, right here you have tie-in and tie-off. If you don't have trims turned on, it's not going to tie a knot, and that can cause you issues with your trim sequence, right? So the other thing is make sure you don't have a bunch of knots, or I call them knots, your tie-ins, tie-offs stacked. So what does that mean? Like if I drew a line and then a separate line. So let's look at it. So if I did this, hit enter, and then I did another one right next to it. And if I have a trim, a tie-in stitch at the start of that one and the end of that one, they're basically on top. Excuse me. They're basically on top of each other, which is not what you want to do, right? So you want to make sure you're not doing trim, 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 like back to back to back sort of thing. I'm trying to think what else would affect your trim. What was the question again? All right. So the presser foot, no, if it's not it's not necessarily going to be lined up with the needle anyway. Because that presser foot can be bent. Like if you do hats, for instance, that the presser foot might be sliding forward, and over time it might bend. So that could happen. It doesn't even allow me to move left or right to trim needle or to change needles. If it's in the middle of sewing, it won't let you do that unless you do a trim first. So you can do a trim immediate on the keypad. That's what those two buttons will get you the key sequence, since my hands are just doing this. But yeah, you can do a trim immediate on the keypad, and that will execute the trim, and then you should be able to move it. So there's that. If you give me some more details on why it won't let you move left and right, or what status your machine's in, that would help too. Do we have to adjust inside DesignShop for needle depth on hats? No. Needle depth is set on the machine, and that is either right or wrong. Okay, it's not something you're going to mess with unless you did something like banged into hoops or things like that. The needle depth is how far it goes into the hook. Okay, so we did get you a link to the keypad functions. All right, so no, needle depth, it's fixed. It's kind of a right or wrong thing on the machine. It's got to be what it's got to be in order to make a stitch. If your machine makes stitches, then the needle depth most likely is fine. The active feed and bobbin tension are all quite important. So how I'm reading this is, I have gotten a 3D effect on the inside of the cap. So how I'm reading that is you're getting too much thread on the back, on the inside of the cap, on the back side of your piece. So those things, what I would look at is make sure you don't accidentally have the puff button selected. Look at your tension settings. So look at what the active feed is doing. Is it set too high? So if you're feeding too much thread, it might be pulling too much to the back. Your bobbin, if it's super tight, it's going to pull more thread to the back. So you want to check your bobbin tensions and then also check your active feed settings and to make sure they're appropriate for what you're working on. Okay. All right. How do you make an SVG file for appliqué? Okay, so let's draw, I guess we'll make an appliqué. All right, so let's say, oh my gosh, this cursor is cracking me up. I'm sorry. So I'm going to draw a shape. Okay, so I've got a walk stitch. I'm going to turn the grid off. All right, so I got this walk stitch. So copy, paste, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to take that guy and give it another color. And I'm going to Control C, Control V, give it another color, and let's this time convert it to a single line center, and I'm going to replace that. Okay, so now I've got a walk for my placement stitch, a walk to hold the fabric down. This guy, let's make that, wow, let's say 35, 30, let's make it 30. 30, and let's make it a tackle stitch. So instead of satin, I'm going to make it tackle. Okay. All right, and then let's take this guy. I'm going to Control C, Control V. This time change it back to a satin. Make it 40, wider, there, and we'll give it another color. All right, there we go. So I've got an applique design. So now I want to turn this thing into into an SVG. So I'm going to copy that first stitch out, that walk. I just like pasting it in a new file. File, save as, change the type to SVG, and there you go. Save it off as whatever name you want. Okay, so you just want to save whatever shape you want to cut. You save it off as an SVG. Okay, what else do we have? Gradient question. I've been struggling with the edges. I like the look of trapunto, but I don't want the stitches on the edge. Unfortunately, when you're doing a gradient like this, the stitches, it's going to go to one edge, and then to go to the next row, it has to make a stitch to come up. All right, so if you want to avoid these little stitches here, the only way you can do that is by turning trapunto off, but that gives you a different look, as you're aware. So for instance, let's just turn this, instead of a regular fill, I'm going to turn it into a custom density one. Apply, and I'm going to turn off the underlay just so it's not showing up for what we're looking at. Wow, this cursor. Okay, so your only options are to leave it like this, because it's going to sew from one end of your element to the other, and then it's got to go down to the next row, right? So it's either going to do the trapunto, which goes when it's sewing this row, go all the way to the wireframe, then jump down, go all the way to the wireframe, then jump down, or it's going to leave this little stitch here, this little connector. That's really, it's how it's done. There's no real other way to avoid those. It's just how it has to sew, right? So you're either going to leave it like this, or you're going to go into properties and turn on Trapunto, and just pay attention to your starts and stops so it's not tracing the border, but you're still, as it goes from row to row, you're going to end up with that small connector stitch from row to row. So there's really no way around that. I mean, I guess technically you could digitize individual lines and do trims between every line. I do not recommend that, but you could do that, I guess. But yeah, those are really what you got. You're either going to do Trapunto and have that stitch, or leave the Trapunto off and have that slight angled stitch towards the edge. Okay. Those were all the questions. Let me scroll up and see if I missed any. So we talked about maintenance. I fixed my cursor to be something silly. Oh, are there any videos on deactivating DesignShop on one computer and activating it on another? Okay, so tools, deactivate product. That's all you got to do. And then go to your new computer and tools, activate product. That changes. Actually, no, it doesn't. It's deactivate, and then when you start it on the other computer, it'll come up with the security screen, and you tell it to activate there. So I'm not sure if there's an actual video on doing that, but that's where it is. So tools, deactivate, and then when you go to your other computer, you would click on the activate. We did get you a link on how to activate and deactivate. All right, any other questions? I'm scrolling around. See if I missed any others. Okay, I don't see any others. All right, so I guess I'll hold up for a little bit just in case there's more that are typed in, but I'm happy the live seemed to work today. I know we had issues last week with the streaming service, so looks like that's all resolved. I know people have been messaging me asking me about the hurricane. I'm on the east coast of Florida. We did all right. Got family on the other coast, which we're all incredibly lucky. They just, lost fences, and some have some roof damage, but in the scheme of things, pretty minor compared to some of the devastation over there. So we're on our side. We're doing good. Lost power for a little while, but no structural damage, so I can't complain. Yeah. Well, you guys have a fantastic weekend. Next week, I'm going to aim for Friday, and we will see what questions you guys might have. Oh, what question? All right, we have another question typed in. What causes gaps in a design? So gaps, I assume you mean in the sew outs. So no, I don't want to look at that. Let's go. I'm going to draw a single line center because it's easy to explain it on. All right. All right, so this is just I'm gonna make it wider. Sorry, 40. I got the single line center thing here. I'm gonna turn off the underlay just so we're just looking at the stitches. So when you're sewing something, how close the stitches are together is kind of gonna determine whether you have gaps in it. So when you sew something out, if you find yourself saying, well, all right, before we do that, let's look at where one stitch to the next. So if I look at these guys here, so where it sews from here, this row to that row, if I go and measure that, let me turn this off. There we go. All right, so if I go measure this now, you'll notice from one point to the other, you'll see in that little box that just popped up on the screen, it says 4 points. So that's the density, all right? So that's this number right here. All right, so the density is how close the rows of stitching are to one another, or how far apart they are. So if you're sewing something and you find yourself going, man, the stitches are so spread out, I see too much fabric, I wish they were closer together, I wish that I had more coverage, I need more stitches. If that's the kind of language going through your head, well, density, I need these rows to go closer together. So what do you think happens to this number now that I pull my toolbar off? That number is going to come down, because the smaller the number, the closer these rows are to one another. So I'm going to change that to 2, not that you're going to make 2, just to show you it. Now I've got double the stitches here. Okay, So that changes it to 2. Now, on the other hand, if you're sewing something, you go, ugh, I am hammering this to death. I have too many stitches. I don't need that much thread. I need to spread it out. If that's the kind of things running through your head, all right, that means your density number goes up. So again, I'm going to make it a silly number just to demonstrate. All right, so now it's 8. So again, if I measure it, which my toolbar I goofed up, there it is. So if I measure from one to another, you'll see that's now 8 points from row to row as it sews. So it's going to sew this stitch, jump to the next row, sew it 8 points over. All right, so that's density. So when you say you want what causes gaps, it can be underlay driven. So if you don't have a good underlay, it might be, you know, the fabric sticking through. It could be your density. So just make sure you're using good design practices, that you have good underlay, you have appropriate densities for the project you're working on, and yeah, and you'll be pretty good there. Let's see, we have a question. What's a good stabilizer for patches? Depends on how you're making the patches. Synthetic, so you can, I'll tell you, I use 6 mil painter's plastic is what I use. I get it at Lowe's or Home Depot. Literally, you know, the plastic drop cloth material, the 6 mil, the thick one, that's what I use. You can use 12 gauge vinyl, the clear vinyl. You can find, you know, if you think about the what you'll see at restaurants sometimes, the plastic that covers the tables, that stuff, that clear vinyl. So that stuff you can find at Joann's, you can buy it online. It's usually a 12 gauge vinyl that works well. I think there's a tutorial article on the FAQ site on Milko's FAQ that shows that material and a technique for making patches that way. 3-ounce stabilizer works well. I mean, it really depends on how you're making them. I'll say I've used pretty much anything I can get my hands on. In a pinch, I've actually used shopping bags. Would I suggest that? No. But, you know, I just wanted to test something at a site. And didn't have anything appropriate, so that's what I did. But yeah, another one is Vilene. So water-soluble stabilizers like Cut and Wash or Badge Master, those work really well as also. And plus they're really nice because they dissolve away and don't leave a plastic or stabilizer on the back. Melanie says, have an EMT 16X. Any tips in general for multiple small trims? Lowered the speed to 800, set active feed is on auto, running about 5. Okay, so that's your active feed. Lowered the speed to 800, set active feed to 2 pieces of tearaway. Multiple. All right, I'm not sure I'm fully understanding. So if you have a bunch of small trims next to each other, one thing to think about is, do you really need all those? A lot of times you can get rid of trims and speed up your sewing process by optimizing the path, right? So that you don't have trims right next to one another, which is always helpful. If things are really thin, right? So you might actually need like another piece of tearaway. I don't know how thick or thin your materials are, but you might actually need to actually thicken it up a little bit. So that might be something to consider, is adding another piece. All right, you're going to send pics. Okay, we'll take a look at those and see if we have any other suggestions. But I'm trying to think. Changing the order of things sometimes helps, so that the tiny trims are not right next to one another. So it sews one, goes to another area, sews that. So that's another thing to look at. But it may be as simple as your stack up is too thin for the active feed that it's running at. So yeah, if you send over the pics and we'll take a look at those and see if we have any other suggestions there. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Trims after the satin column. Okay. I don't know. have to look at it to give you specific suggestions. Because it should just trim. All right, any other questions? I don't see any. This cursor is too funny. All right, everybody. I'll be back next Friday with whatever questions you have. Yeah, you guys have a fantastic weekend. And Melanie, I'll see if I can find the pictures and take a look and see if we've got other suggestions for you. But short of that, you guys have a great weekend, and I will talk to you next week. Have fun sewing, and till then, bye everyone.